Welcome to the worship of the Meaford Church of Christ. We're glad that you have chosen to join us, and we pray that this effort can be a blessing to you. We would remind you that we're meeting in person, and so if you're watching here locally in town, you are able to, or we would invite you to come and join us as we are, sort of transitioning to more in-person worship at this point. Not that we plan to get rid of the online presentation. We're just not sure how that will work. Here's another reminder, though, related to that. If you are watching this and are not able to attend in person, just be thinking about what the transition might look like. Of course, I'm going to be moving over to the Barrie Church of Christ in the next few weeks, and that will mean that these presentations in this particular format won't continue. Now, they will continue in the sense that, I'll be recording our presentations in Barrie, and that will be available probably as a live stream and then later as a video. So I'm just trying to give you a heads up so you can kind of think about how you're going to do this if you're using these lessons for your Sunday worship service. All right. So that's the main announcement. For everyone here in Meaford, I would encourage you to check your bulletin. There are a number of things in there that are pretty important right now. So please check your bulletin. There are a couple of meetings we have coming up and a couple of things that we need to get in place so that as I make my departure, someone can pick up some of the things that need to continue to get done. All right. Those are the main announcements that I have. I invite you at this point to pause the video, do whatever you need to do to prepare for the Lord's table. All right, now that you're back, I'm going to be in Revelation chapter 1. And again, this is a passage that we don't always think of, but there are two things I want to emphasize. So let me begin reading first of all, and then I'll make a couple of brief points that may help us as we reflect on the sacrifice of Christ and on the impact that it has on our lives in this world. So Revelation chapter 1, beginning in verse 9. I, John, your brother and partner in tribulation and the kingdom and the patient endurance that are in Jesus, was on the island called Patmos, on account of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a loud voice like a trumpet, saying, write what you see in a book and send it to the 7 churches, to Ephesus, to Smyrna, to Pergamum, to Thyatira, to Sardis, and to Philadelphia, and to Laodicea. Then I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me, and turning I saw 7 golden lampstands. And in the midst of the lampstands, one like a son of man, clothed with a long robe and with a golden sash around his chest. The hairs of his head were white, like white wool, like snow. His eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet were like burnished bronze, refined in a furnace, and his voice was like the roar of many waters. In his right hand he held 7 stars. From his mouth came a sharp 2-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in full strength. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead, but he laid his right hand on me, saying, fear not, I am the first and the last, and the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and Hades. Write therefore the things that you have seen, those that are and those that are to take place. As for the mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my hand and the 7 lampstands, the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. I read that passage because we often are reminded of Christ meeting with us around the table. And here we have a vision of John describing Jesus in the midst of his churches. And I think it's a powerful image that can help us understand who Jesus is to us and the role that he continues to play in his body among his people. And so as we partake of the emblems and as we consider the sacrifice of Christ, the achievement that he carried out on the cross, what it means for us and what it means for his church, I would encourage you to realize that he is among us, that we, because of his sacrifice, are in fellowship with Jesus and in fellowship with his people. And this dramatic vision of John reminds us of that central truth. I hope those thoughts are helpful to you as you, at your own home, partake of the emblems. And I hope they have an impact not only for this moment, but through each day that we face in service to God. So the lesson that I have is kind of a long lesson this week. In fact, it's so long that we're going to have to split it into 2 weeks. So I'm going to cover half of it this week. I'm going to cover the other half next week. I know that you guys really want to get your money's worth and you want me to be speaking as long as humanly possible. But for the sake of my voice and honestly, your time, I'm going to break this lesson into 2 parts. Now, the content actually comes from a lady named Elizabeth Urbanowitz, and I'm probably saying that name totally wrong. But Elizabeth was an elementary school teacher. She taught in a Christian school, and through her interaction with her students, she began to notice some trends, some troubling trends that took the form of ideas and beliefs that the kids she was teaching in a Christian elementary school bought into. And so she she compiled the list, and then she began to say, how can I address these things? And so she actually has developed a whole education package, which I'm not going to get into, but what I am going to do is take her list of beliefs that she found were commonly held even by Christian young people, and were beginning to take hold already at elementary ages. And I'm going to go through this list because 2 things. Number one, if this is the problem, if this is a problem that she found among elementary school students in Christian schools, imagine how pervasive the problem is for all of our kids who go to public schools. But furthermore, imagine how pervasive these lies is what I'm going to call them. Okay, these lies are among even us as Christian adults. And so I'd like to address these 7 lies that our children probably believe, and many of us may believe as well. And address each one, talk about, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to address what is the idea, why is it harmful, and how can we respond to it, or how can we correct it. Okay, now I want to begin by listing for you those lies. And then today we'll cover the first half of that list, and next week we'll cover the rest. Okay, so the 7 lies, I'm going to give you all 7 today, just so you can be thinking about this and be preparing even for next week and kind of getting your head in that mind, in that line of thinking. So number one lie that is commonly believed among Christian young people: if I feel it, it must be true. Number 1. Number 2, follow your heart. Number 2 is follow your heart. Number 3, love is affirming everything I feel. That is, if you love me, you'll affirm everything that I feel. Faith, number 4, faith is the opposite of knowledge. Number 5, humans are the result of blind, unguided evolution. Number 6, you are the one you've been waiting for. That's number 6. You are the one you've been waiting for. And finally, number 7, a good God won't judge. And implied in that is neither will a good person. All right. Each of these ideas, again, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the idea. We're going to say, this is what the idea is. Here's why it's problematic. And here's perhaps, the last 2 points will get muddled together a little bit, because identifying why it's a problem and addressing the problem are kind of, together. Because if you can tell someone what's wrong with an idea, that also kind of addresses the idea. Okay. So let's begin with at least the first 3. We might go a little bit further than the first 3, but probably not. That might be a little ambitious. So let's go ahead. The last 4 I find were a little bit shorter of discussion. So we're going to do 3 today and 4 next week. Number 1, if I feel it, it must be true. This is the idea that it's up to me what is true for me, and it's up to you what's true for you. Truth is subjective, and it's based on my own feelings and experiences. What's true for me may not be true for others. And we can ask people, when we're dealing with kids, when we're dealing with neighbors, friends, whatever, we can ask people how they define truth or how they think about truth, or maybe even just ask them, is truth applicable to everyone? All right. in surveys of believing young people. Okay, when asked this exact question, is truth common to everyone? About 50% of kids say no. They say, no, truth is dependent on who you are and where you are and a number of other things. And this is problematic because you may be teaching your kids important values, maybe important moral truths or important spiritual truths. You may be teaching these to your children, and they're nodding their head in agreement and saying, yeah, this stuff sounds good. But in the back of their minds, what they're really saying is, this sounds good for us and our family, or maybe it just sounds good for you, Mom, or you, Dad, right? This is your truth, but it's really not my truth. And so we need to, first of all, help our kids and help our friends and neighbors and even help ourselves to understand that truth is that which corresponds to reality. Okay? Truth is that which corresponds to reality. And furthermore, we need to help them get their heads around the concept that some truths are objective. That is, they're outside of my own perception. Okay? So, let me use a car to illustrate subjective and objective truth. So, my favorite car color is blue. That's true about me, and that's a subjective truth because it's up to my personal preference. Now, my family car is white. Okay, it's not blue. Right? As much as I may wish it was blue, the objective reality of the car color is that it just is what it is. Okay, so objectively the car is white. Subjectively, my favorite color is blue. And so we can illustrate this in a number of important ways. And a great way to drive this point home to young people or even old people, you could even have an exercise to demonstrate this, is to give, break a bunch of kids into two teams, give both teams a set of directions. One set of directions is accurate and will lead them to whatever prize you have arranged for them to find. The other set of directions is inaccurate and does not lead anywhere. All right, and when the effort is made, and if you can imagine this illustration playing out in real life, you could do it at home with your own children, you could do it in a Sunday school class, you could even do it in a school setting. But the point is, some of those kids are going to find what they're looking for and others will not. And that can help you to drive this point home, that truth is that which accurately describes reality, that which corresponds to reality. All right. So, having kind of covered the basics here, we need to go one step further and understand, okay, that first of all, our kids may not have thought this all the way through. And even at a young age, we need to start reinforcing some of these ideas. But we also need to remember that Jesus makes this bold claim about truth. I am the way, the truth, and the life. When we think of what the Bible says about truth, it's that truth can set us free, that truth can sanctify us, that there's a message, okay? Peter is told, go and declare a message Cornelius is told that Peter will come and declare a message by which him and his household will be saved. Christianity is making these powerful and central claims to objective truth that you must buy into if it's to be of any value to you. And so Jesus, right, says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. And you may recall that when Oprah was presented with that particular quotation, she famously said, there can't be only one way. And sadly, Oprah defines herself as a Christian, right? She thinks of herself that way. Now, rejecting the clear statement of Jesus and still trying to be a Christian is not really a possible thing, but nonetheless, she imagines that. All right, and the problem here is that she's not the only one, right? Many will hold that the Bible is true for me and I like its teaching, but it's not true for others. And Christianity is true for me or for some people, but not for everyone. Right? Sometimes this is aimed at a specific subject. Oftentimes I hear this same kind of thinking applied, to in the believing world, where we go, well, we're all Christians, but this group of Christians thinks that X, Y, and Z, and that other group of Christians thinks, A, B, C. And you kind of go, whoa, you realize that's not how Christianity works, right? We are all called to listen to and obey Jesus, right? We don't get to pick and choose what of his teachings we agree with and what we disagree with, okay? And another sort of symptom of this idea that truth is subjective and what's true for you may not be true for someone else. I'll share a perfect example. In a discussion of baptism with someone, we were talking about baptism, and they said, well, your group believes this about baptism and does this with baptism, but this other group that I know about does something else. And it's like, well, no, real Christians believe the same thing about baptism. If you don't, there's something really, really wrong here. All right. A poll was done among Christian adults, okay, sort of middle-aged people who identified as believing Christians. And they were asked if they believed that it was good to proselytize. That is, it was good to evangelize, to share the gospel. Do you know that the majority of middle-aged believers said no? Right? That it was kind of rude and a little pushy to share your faith. Right? And this ties directly into this idea that, truth is not really this broad thing that applies to everyone all the time. There's my truth and there's your truth, and the two don't always intersect. Right? Well, no, the fact is truth, and it applies to everyone. Now, God doesn't force everyone to accept it. We're on our own to either say, yes, that's, to recognize and respond to the truth. That's true. We are on our own about whether or not we do that. Okay? But even because we can choose to believe and obey or not, okay, that doesn't mean that we won't have to deal with the consequences, right? So if I'm about to cross the road and you say to me, hey, Kevin, you better wait, there's a car coming. I don't have to believe you. I can be like, that guy's full of baloney, probably wore the wrong prescription today, and I can cross the road, right? It's totally up to me. But the consequences are not up to me. Right? I'm either going to be right that there's no cars and it's safe to cross the road, or I'm going to be wrong and get run over. I had someone tell me recently about this that, pretty much their exact quote was, Christianity is good and I appreciate it so long as no one tries to force it on me. Right? And what they meant by that is, they know I'm a preacher, okay? And so they were kind of saying, look, Kevin, I know you're a preacher. I don't want you trying to share your religious nonsense with me, right? And oftentimes, many of you, people who know you're a Christian, may have given you a similar line. And again, it's the underlying assumption is that truth is subjective. Your truth, my truth, their truth are all different and yet all legitimately true. And that's just not the way reality works. Number one problem is that whatever I feel must be true. The number two problem is follow your heart. Follow your heart. Now, there's certainly some, what would you say? People need to understand that they're valuable and that, they should be ambitious and they should work hard. Okay, that's not what we're talking about here. But the idea that you should be authentic and you should just do what feels good and right to you. This is similar to our first claim, but it's just more personal. Okay, that I am whoever I want to be, and however I feel inside, that's kind of who I am. Well, I have to share this. There's a humorous story. It actually comes from a sitcom where, all the characters on the sitcom go and they hear this motivational speech. It's an ex-Olympian who, gives this inspiring speech all about how, you can do anything you set your mind to and you can be anyone you want to be and do anything that you want to do. And so, here's all these, sort of late teens, early 20s characters. And this girl who, is, I don't know, maybe late teens, let's call her 18 or 19, something like that, I think in the show. She says, yep, I'm quitting my job and I'm going to become an Olympic gymnast. And they're like, what? And she's like, yeah, this motivational speaker convinced me that I can be whoever I want to be. And so I quit and I'm off to the Olympics. Well, all of her friends around are like, I don't know if that's the best idea. And it's funny because one of her friends takes her aside and goes, look, I don't know if this is a really good plan. And she says, well, you just don't believe in me. Well, I do. She says, well, I do believe in you, but I just want what's best for you. And I don't think it's responsible for you to quit your job and try to go to the Olympics when you're 18 years of age, okay? When, some Olympic athletes have already had their shot and retired by then. So the story was a joke, and it was pretty funny to watch sort of this awkward situation unfold. However, it does demonstrate the real problem with this kind of follow your heart thinking, right? We need to help kids deal with this lie because they'll hear it so much. And one thing I will say is if you've already established our point from before, that is, if you've already shared with kids that there are subjective and objective truths, and that truth is that which corresponds to reality. If they've already kind of handled that, then the battle is halfway done, okay? But the teacher who shared this list, Elizabeth, she tells a story of her kids kind of figuring it out. And so she says, I was talking about this with my kids, and one of them put up their hand and they said, but miss, I see a bit of a problem here. And she said, well, what is it? He said, well, what if my heart says that I need this video game, but my dad's heart says that I don't? And I was like, she said before she could even fully explain, the kids were already like, yeah, something is not right about this. And that's because our heart is not totally trustworthy, guys. It really isn't. Now, I want to share with you just a couple of quick principles, right? Remember in Genesis when Joseph's brothers have sold him into slavery. Okay, and they go back to Jacob and they say to Jacob, Joseph's dead. Jacob's heart responds as it appropriately should, with grief and sorrow at the death of his son. But notice, his heart has no idea that it isn't true. His heart just responds, even though Joseph is still alive. Right? Our hearts can easily be fooled. They don't have some kind of magical connection to the truth where they'll give us special insights. Jacob did exactly what he would do if Joseph actually was dead, because in his heart he believed that he was. All right. I don't know if you've ever done this. I don't recommend it, but imagine if you wake your kids up on a school day, tell them, hey, it's a snow day, you don't have to go to school. Their hearts are going to go crazy and they're going to be leaping around the house with joy. Their hearts are not going to tell them, hey, mom and dad are messing with you, right? Hearts don't work that way. They're easily fooled, all right? Joel, my oldest son, I have to say, I'm kind of proud of him about this, but he's reaching that age where he's starting to work on his emotional response, where he says, I think I'm overreacting to this, or I think I'm, getting too frustrated given whatever is happening. And he's trying to figure out, number one, why he responds emotionally to certain things and how to temper that response. And this is an important step in maturity. He's realizing that, hey, my heart isn't always reliable. All right. I know how I feel. By the way, in a counseling situation, if something is going on where someone is deeply disturbed, you need to acknowledge their feelings, right? Their feelings are real and they actually do feel that way. But then you need to walk them through and start to develop in them the ability to question those feelings and make sure that they are responding to what's true. Jeremiah 17 and verse 9 says, the heart is desperately wicked. Who can trust it? And in the wise man tells us in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 to trust the Lord with all our heart and lean not on our own understanding. All right. And of course, it's easy to demonstrate this. All you need to do is ask kids, how many times in a given day they need to deny the impulses of their hearts, because their hearts are pushing them in a pretty negative and even perhaps dangerous direction. One person I heard tells a story about being a kid where when the rule at his house was, I don't know why I'm tripping over that so much, but the rule at this guy's house was you have to come home when the street lights come on. Well, he noticed that the street light directly in front of his house was broken. So he kind of lawyered his way into thinking, I guess since the streetlight's broken, I really don't have to go home when the streetlights come on because the one right by my house isn't even on. So I can stay out as late as I want. And he did. Right? Our heart will often motivate us to do what we want to do, not necessarily what we should do. Right? And so, if I feel it, it must be true. Follow your heart. Number 3 lie is loving means affirming everything I feel. Loving me means affirming everything I feel. The Bible, of course, defines love as desiring what's best for another, putting their interests above your own. But we've shifted to define love as this emotional response that's never difficult, it's never uncomfortable, it's always this frilly-dilly, heart pink, happy feeling. Especially these days, we're told that the way to love someone is to affirm everything they think, everything they believe, everything that they do. And if you question any of that stuff, you could be accused of violence or hate speech. And sometimes it could be even punishable by law. When the fact is, this couldn't be further from the truth. When people are engaging in dangerous, harmful behaviors, harmful to themselves, harmful to others, and the least loving thing you could do is affirm those choices, right? And I want to remind you of a powerful story that many of us are familiar with. One gospel account can be found in Mark chapter 10, verses 17 through 27. And it's the account of the rich young ruler. And you recall the rich young ruler comes to Jesus and he wants to know what he must do to inherit eternal life. And Jesus, talks about the commandments. He says, I've observed the commandments since I was a little kid, right? And Jesus, and listen to this, looking at him, we read in Mark 10:17, Jesus showed love to him and said, one thing you lack. Go and sell all you possess and give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. And come follow me. By our modern definition of love, this would be the worst thing you could do to somebody. But notice the Bible tells us that what Jesus did to love this man was to tell him what he needed to do and how he was doing things that weren't quite right in his life. Right? This is especially prevalent in the discussion of gender and all the confusion that's associated with this right now. And of course, the medical approach to this sort of gender confusion stuff that sometimes comes up these days is literally called affirming treatment. You must, in fact, by law, a doctor must affirm someone's gender confusion or gender identity, even if that's harmful to them physically, emotionally, socially, right? To understand, we need to acknowledge here, by the way, that this is a pretty dangerous situation, and people who are, dealing with this transgender, gender confusion stuff, the suicide rate among that group is extremely high, and what they need to be taught is acceptance. Right? They need to learn to be comfortable in their own skin. And it makes sense that the suicide rate is so high because this is a person who dislikes themselves so much that they're going to alter physically their body. That's how uncomfortable they are in their own body. And they need to learn to become comfortable. That's really what needs to happen there. It's critical to point out at this juncture that if people know that you love them, that you genuinely desire what is best for them, they will allow you to have these difficult conversations. Thomas Sowell has a fantastic quotation along these lines. Sowell says, when you want to help people, you tell them the truth. Hear that? When you want to help people, you tell them the truth. When you want to help yourself, you tell them what they want to hear. And so, affirming someone, telling them what they want to hear, that is not loving. That's selfish. Nothing is more harmful than a lie. Because a lie doesn't just harm you once. When you believe a lie, it's like you're carrying around a landmine and purposely setting it down and stepping on it over and over and over again because you keep buying into a false, damaging premise. Satan lied to Eve and undid all of the joy and fellowship and goodness that God had established in creation. And today, Satan is lying to us. He wants us to believe those lies so that he can destroy all of the goodness and joy and fellowship that we have with God and that others could potentially have with God. It's our responsibility as Christians to love them enough to tell the truth, to expose the lies that are hurting them, and to point them toward the God who loves them and who indeed is the way, the truth, and the life. And so if you're watching this and you've been believing some lies, I would urge you to abandon those bad ideas that are pushing you further away from God and to accept the truths that God has shared, that Jesus is his Son, that he died to save us from sin, and to respond to what God has done through Christ by faith and repentance and baptism for the remission of sins. If you're listening to this, then I would urge you to take up the effort of truth. To understand that lies and believing lies is incredibly harmful to people. And to lovingly and gently point them toward the truths that they need to know and accept for them to have and be all that they can be.